Happy Monday, everybody, and welcome to Real News. The Oscars are over, sequesters in front of us, and President Obama has kicked off the week by highlighting the supposedly dire consequences of the sequester. Washington and the mainstream media continue to hyperventilate over what amounts to a minuscule cut in government spending, and we'll show you a little bit later. But first, we want to begin by focusing on your fiscal health, specifically how American families continue to struggle with their own debt in the midst of the Obama recovery.
Is this something that we should be concerned about? Does this mean that the economy is in fact stalling out? Joining us tonight is contributor to Forbes, economist Dan Mitchell. Dan, thank you very much for joining us.
Glad to be on the program.
Dan, I gave a ton of numbers there. We're talking median, we're talking household debt, private debt, what percentage they've been shed, looking at all these numbers. To sort of bring this home for the audience, I want to read to you a quote from a Wall Street Journal editorial written by Jeffrey Canada, Stanley Druckenmiller, who's a very well-known hedge fund manager, one of the most well-known, and Kevin Warsh. And I want to ask you if you think this ties into what we're talking about here. The failure to be forthright on fiscal policy is doing grievous harm to the country's long-term growth prospects. And the greatest casualties will be young Americans of all stripes who want and need an opportunity to succeed. The country's existing entitlement programs are not just unaffordable, they are also profoundly unfair to those who are taking their first steps in search of opportunity. Dan, let me ask you, they entitled that editorial, Arresting Generational Theft. Are these numbers telling us that the older generation is maintaining a larger share of the wealth and the younger generation is really getting left out in the cold here?
There's no question that younger people are really just getting you-know-what because of the very anemic recovery that we're in. And there's lots of academic research that if you start your career in a weak economy or a recession, it has a lifetime impact on your wage levels and your salary over time. So a lot of the young people just entering the economy, they thought Obama was going to be their hero and their savior, but he's sort of condemning them to a lifetime of lower income. Now, the good news, little bit of good news, is that at least they're avoiding too much debt. The private sector has been intelligently deleveraging itself, while at the same time, as that editorial you cited, it shows the federal government is going deeper and deeper into the red every single day because government is just far too big. And that's the real danger in the long run, is where young people don't have good career options now, and the future doesn't look good because Washington is making things worse, not better.
Now, what could turn this around, though? I mean, assuming that younger people, yes, it's good that they have less debt, but assuming that they're also forestalling processes, including having children, something we've talked about on this show, buying homes, unwilling to even take out lines of credit, never mind exercise that, doesn't that have kind of a deflationary effect on the economy, and can't that sort of continue to hamper what's supposed to be our so-called recovery?
Yes, it can, but on the other hand, we don't want people to take out more debt than they can afford. The ratio is to look at what's your total wealth compared to your total debt, and what's your total income compared to how you have to use that income, including servicing any debt you've already had. And again, the private sector is being a lot more responsible. The giddy days of the housing bubble are gone. People are being more prudent. And for the most part, even if they're being over-prudent, that's probably a good thing. But we're not getting the same intelligent financing or financial decisions being made in Washington. And when you look at the entitlement programs that are this giant unfunded liability on the future of our economy, and then you look at a tax code that is becoming more punitive and complicated and onerous with each passing day, you begin to wonder, is America just Greece, but 15 or 20 years ahead of time?
People talk about a housing reset. We've seen people say, oh, well, it's slowly coming back. But the fact of the matter is, for a lot of Americans now trying to get that entry-level home, they're having a tremendously difficult time because of a number of things. And Will mentions the fact that we had an inflated housing market before, but payroll taxes are up, gas prices are up, unemployment still remains very high. American home ownership, is that ever going to come back as what it once was?
If we get the federal government out of the home ownership market, then as far as I'm concerned, whatever result we get is perfectly fine, because that's the result of private individuals making their own decisions, using their own money. The problem is we had a housing bubble that was heavily caused by government intervention with easy money policy and the corrupt subsidies from Fannie and Freddie. And then ever since, after the bubble popped, the government's been trying to reinflate that bubble, and that's causing some people to hold off on buying homes because house prices haven't fallen to the market clearing level. But no one even knows what the market clearing level is because the government won't get out of the market. We look at that 72,000 pages of tax law. I don't know how much of that is accounted for by residential real estate, but whether we're looking at direct subsidies through Fannie, Freddie, FHA, Department of Housing and Urban Development, or whether we're looking at the tax code, we should be very upset that politicians in Washington are trying to do central planning through the back door on our economy.
And Dan, thank you very much for coming on, sharing your expertise. We appreciate it.